We're surrounded by all this broken concrete, and it doesn't look like very much, but it's actually one of the most significant sites in the Commonwealth Air Training Plan, the former Paulson Bombing and Gunnery School. I'm Gordon Goldsborough, president of the Manitoba Historical Society, radio and newspaper columnist, and author of books on the neglected, the overlooked, the hidden places from Manitoba's past. Join me in this series as we explore back roads to places that tell great stories about how things used to be and how we've ended up where we are today. This is Abandoned Manitoba. A major role played by Canada during the Second World War was to teach thousands of young people to be pilots, navigators, bomb aimers, wireless operators, and other members of flight crews. Thousands more were trained to serve on ground crews as mechanics, technicians, and more. They came from all over Canada, Great Britain, New Zealand, and Australia, as well as allied countries. In Manitoba, major facilities included 5 service flying training schools, 1 wireless school, 2 bombing and gunnery schools, 1 air observer school, and 3 elementary flying training schools. So construction of this facility began in early 1941, and over the next several months, contractors from Winnipeg and elsewhere built an entire city here. They built 6 enormous aircraft hangars to store the aircraft. They built runways, they built roads, they built buildings to accommodate the military personnel, they built messes, they had a parade ground, they had a sewage treatment plant, they had a dental clinic, they had all of the trappings of a city. And yet, after the war was over and it was all taken away, all you're really left with are a few remnants. You can see here, for example, a big rectangular area, but you really can't fully grasp the scope of this site here on the ground. For over 5 years, I have been using a drone to explore historic sites. They're remarkably easy to fly and give an invaluable perspective from above that reveals bird's-eye details not visible in any other way. So one of Canada's roles in the war effort was to train air crews. But even if you were going to become a pilot, you still had to know how to fire a gun, because if, for example, you crash-landed somewhere in enemy territory, you'd have to defend yourself. So every one of the air crews had to train in riflery. They basically had to learn how to fire a gun, how to fire accurately, and so every one of these facilities would have what was known as a stop butt. Basically, as a target, you'd shoot at it, and the idea of a wall, a concrete wall, it would stop the bullets so they wouldn't keep flying and potentially hurt someone. So here we are standing beside the Paulson stop butt. And we know it was a stop butt because if we look at the surface of the concrete, the once smooth surface is pitted all over with holes, which of course are bullet holes, where the rifle bullets would have hit the wall as they got stopped. And so probably on the ground here below us are the remains of all of those bullets that would have ricocheted off and fallen to the ground in front of us here. Paulson was selected for its close proximity to Dauphin Lake, so practicing bombers could drop their payloads on targets moored offshore. Construction started in late 1940, and the facility was mostly completed by January 1941. The Bombing and Gunnery School was essentially a fully serviced city for hundreds of residents. Roads crisscrossed the square-mile site. Electricity was provided by the Manitoba Power Commission. Large concrete tanks buried partly in the ground provided water for day-to-day use and for emergency firefighting, and wastes were processed in a small treatment facility. There were dormitories for male and female military personnel, messes for officers, non-commissioned officers, other ranks, and civilians. There was a hospital, dental clinic, recreation hall, post office, and chapel. And 6 huge hangars housed training aircraft while not in use. At its height, there would have been hundreds of people here at the base, military personnel, civilian workers, and of course they needed to be provided with services. They needed running water, they needed sewer service, and so this is the remains of the sewage treatment plant. By 1945, it was pretty clear that the war was coming to an end, so the need for facilities like this one were over. They began disassembling it. Some of the buildings were demolished, some of the smaller ones were moved away, so that today, as far as we know, there are just 3 buildings left. There's a small guardhouse, there's a small pump house. The largest building is this one. This is the former officers' mess. During the war, this would have been where the officers came for their meals. They probably relaxed here. They might have even invited some of the local ladies in for some recreational activities. But since the war was over, they brought it to this site, they put it on a new foundation. They used it for a number of years as a workshop. Well, today, it's mostly a haven for birds. After the base was decommissioned, the paved runways were simply abandoned. Trees and other plants grew through the cracks in the pavement, resulting in a triangular forest. As I left Paulson and headed for home, I got a call offering me a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, a flight in a working aircraft from the Second World War, just like the ones that flew at Paulson. I truly could not pass it up, even if I was a bit nervous.
So this is the plane Gordon will be going up in today. We call it a Cornell, or it's a PT-26 aircraft. It was one of the elementary trainers that was used in World War II. They call them elementary trainer because when they first come, they would be training on something like a Fleet Finch or the iconic biplane, the Tiger Moth. And then another one of the trainers they used was the Cornell. It was a bigger airplane, a heavier airplane, and the whole idea was to get them some experience in a plane that was heavier, to handle a little heavier on the stick, as we call it, just to get used to it. So when they went to more advanced trainers, they would have a bit of a progression, if you will, as they moved along, like into something like the Harvard, before they got posted overseas and then they were in whatever they were flying militarily at that point in time. It's a great airplane to fly. It's a very stable airplane. It's got a nice wide stance, if you looked at the undercarriage, so that helps to keep it stable, land smoothly and that sort of thing. And so it's a 2-place tandem, as we call it. The instructor would sit in the back and the pilot would be in the front, and completely dual controls, so whatever controls are in the back are in the front too. So if it was necessary, the instructor could of course take over or control the aircraft as well. But yeah, many people got trained in these. I don't know how many of these are left flying in the world. There's not that many. I don't think there'd be 100 probably. In fact, I think that might be top heavy. I don't really know the exact number. I have to confess to that, but not a large number, obviously, that are flying anymore and that are maintained. But I love flying this particular airplane. It's a real privilege, and I'd have to say there's not a time I don't go up into it. When I'm flying over the the fields, and I may be going around, who knows, Verdun, Dauphin, into Winnipeg, wherever I happen to be going, that when I'm flying along and I look over that yellow wing down into the crop, that I imagine those young 18, 19, 20-year-olds up there, doing the same thing in this very airplane, albeit many, many years ago. So the nostalgia on that and the history of it isn't wasted on me. I just find that fascinating. It's one of the things that drew me to the museum in the first place, was the history and then the aviation part of it, of course, that fit my own personal hobbies and things I like to do.